Welcome to Behind the Recipe. I'm your host, Christina Hitchcock. Join me every week as we dive into the joys of cooking, explore kitchen tips and tricks, and share delicious recipes that will inspire your next meal. So, whether you're a seasoned cook or just learning your way around the stove, there's something here for everyone. Let's get cooking. Today, we're talking with my friend Heather Johnson from the Food Hussy about cooking for one or two people. And this has been a very uh, popular topic on my site, Heather. So, welcome to the show. I'm excited to talk with you today.
Thanks. I'm excited to be here.
Yay. So, before we get started, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
So I am in the Cincinnati area and I am single forever. Um, I'm an expert at cooking for one or two. I was married for a little while, but now he's gone. And this semester I've had an exchange student from Italy. And so I've been cooking for one or two, and she's a vegetarian-ish. And also her parents own a restaurant, so no pressure.
Oh, no pressure there at all.
Yeah. So I've been cooking for one or two for 30 years.
Oh,
So
well, that is a lot of experience. So I'm excited to hear what you have to say. I have a small family myself. There's only three of us, and many nights there's only two of us or one of us when everybody is out and about. So I kind of feel where you're at.
yeah, and I have a blog. It's called thefoodhussy.com. And I do a lot of copycat recipes. I also do some Traeger, some Blackstone, which those things tend to make a lot of food. So used to that as well. But I'm also kind of obsessed with my air fryer.
Ooh, okay.
So that's fun. And I won an episode of Guys Grocery Games. So
Well, you should way to bury the lead.
yeah, I won 20 grand and I met Guy Fieri. It was fun. So,
Oh, that's so awesome. That is so
so, like
cool.
I'm legit. Like I can cook. Guy told me that mine was better than his.
Wow. What did you win with? Like what recipe was that?
Well, we had to make recipes out of his cookbooks because we were a super fan episode because
Okay.
I'm a chef, not like an actual chef. And so I made a hoagie that he had a meatball hoagie, but I made it with ground sausage
Hmm.
and to save time since we were on a time clock, literally. And so he thought mine tasted better than his, is what he said. So
Wow. Well, there's your pat on the back. I'll
I
give you a
know.
pat on the back.
I cried like 17 times during the episode. It was hilarious. So
That is awesome. Well, congratulations on that. That's quite the feather to put in your cap.
yeah, I tote that all the time. I was on Guy Grocery Games.
Yeah, you totally should. I'd milk that for all it's worth. So, when it comes to cooking for one or two or small batches of things, do you have any strategies that you employ or any tips or I don't
Yeah,
know.
definitely. So it actually comes into play too. I did a cookbook and it's air fryer cooking for one.
Okay.
So when I did this cookbook, I kind of had to like think of things like that because especially with like different sometimes ingredients, like you'd make something with like a can of biscuits. Well, I'm not gonna use a can of biscuits. I mean, I will eat all five because
I'm
I'm a big
like, wait,
girl.
wait, wait. I totally would.
Yeah. But the thing is if you're just doing a breakfast or something like that, you can't pop open this can of biscuits and not use all five. So I sort of came up with some little things that sometimes like throughout the book, I was like, okay, I can't use half an egg, things like that. So I like individually packaged protein. So sometimes you get like the chicken breasts, they
Right.
cost more in those individually like vacuum sealed, but
Right.
you're also like, or I buy a big pack and then I break it down as soon as I get it home into like I put one chicken breast in each bag and then I put each like five of those like little sandwich bags with a chicken breast into a big gallon bag and put them in the freezer so I can just grab one chicken boob at a time.
Right. Okay, that's
So
great.
that's one thing is like individually packaged proteins. I'm actually literally looking in my book. I think that you can get creative with bread, like with those biscuits. Like I found a lot of ways to use like sliced bread, like as you could. So like I did something that was stuffed in this cookbook, and I just rolled out a piece of bread,
Right.
and then I did like French toast roll-ups or something like that, and then I did some other stuff and like pie pockets.
Okay,
Like you
yeah,
might
yeah.
pie filling
Hmm.
in a biscuit and bake it. Well, I didn't want to use a whole can of biscuits, so I just rolled out a piece of bread and put like pie filling and then put the other piece on top and smushed it on the sides. So you can get kind of creative with things when you need to. Fresh fruit over canned. Like sometimes recipes will call for like canned pie filling
Right.
and just use fresh fruit instead. Like it's gonna, you might need to add a little sugar to it, but that saved a lot. Mini vegetables, like the little mini sweet peppers, green onions instead of a full onion, then you're not left with like half a thing
Yeah,
and
that's
they
a
get
great
like
tip. Yeah.
funky,
Yeah,
like
like I never thought about that, but like green onions do have a similar flavor to an entire onion, and you don't need to use as much.
and they sell those mini cucumbers, little
Mhm.
mini sweet peppers.
Yeah,
I would just try to use those in any time and I could, or even cherry tomatoes instead of Roma, like, or
right,
Roma tomatoes instead of a big tomato, because
right.
Roma tomatoes are so small. And then obviously like getting like pint-sized dairy products is
Mm.
another like easy way to just, kind of save. So you're not buying like nothing's worse than you need a third of a cup of milk and you're like, I have a half a gallon of milk and I don't drink milk,
Right,
So
right.
sometimes you're paying a little bit more, but in the long run, you're not throwing it away. So it's like, why just do it anyway? So,
Yeah. One of my tips that I like to do if I need, and this comes as from being a food blogger, and maybe you just need a little bit of something for a recipe that you're making, is I hit the salad bar a lot in the grocery store and just get like the exact amount that I need.
well, here's a funny. I needed blue cheese for a recipe, and I live in a hillbilly town. Gosh, love my hillbilly town, but I do. And the Kroger, the grocery store in my town, did not sell blue cheese. And so I went to a restaurant in town because I knew they had really good blue cheese dressing. And I was like, I bet they have it for salad. So I said, hey, can I get some blue cheese? I'll buy it from you. Like, I just need a little bit of blue cheese to
Yeah.
put on top of this thing. And they were like, sure, stop by, pick it up. And I stopped and I got it. And they gave me blue cheese dressing.
Oh.
So I still didn't get my blue cheese. So I was like, no, I don't need blue cheese dressing. I can't rinse the dressing off just for these
Oh.
little crumbles of blue cheese. So I just used goat cheese in the pictures and I lied. I
Oh.
was, oh well, but
Well,
yeah.
great in theory. Didn't work out in practice, but great in theory.
Yeah,
I
a
do.
salad bar would be a great idea for things too. If you need chopped veggies or something like
Yeah.
that, save time and
Yeah. Or even just like a little bits of fruit or whatever they have.
well,
I've
and I
also
also
used.
like my cookbook was for the air fryer.
Mhm.
So I did a lot with that, but also like little ramekins. They're like the little ceramic dishes
Right.
that like a pudding cup kind of size. I
Yeah.
use those a lot because for cooking individual portions, like there's some desserts in this cookbook and stuff like that. And so you can make like individual cakes or little things like that in like smaller sizes. So you're not having a 9 by 13 chocolate cake sitting on your counter.
Calling your name at 10 o'clock at night saying,
Oh,
hello, come to the
yeah, my
kitchen.
exchange student is a chocoholic, and we just killed a 9 by 13 cake. I was
Oh,
like, I need you to go. I can't take it anymore.
I can't eat like
I can't
this.
eat like this anymore.
Yeah. But you bring up a good point because the vessel in which you cook your food can make a big difference. I know, like, if I have to make a lasagna and there's just three of us, I will do it in a bread pan instead of a 9 by 13. That way it's just enough for one meal for us. I don't have to worry about, eating the leftovers for the next week. And it's easier. It cooks quicker too when it's in a smaller container. And meatloaf I do in muffin pans instead of a bread, like a bread dish. I use a muffin tin. It cooks way faster. And then I can make just as many as I want.
Well, and honestly, sometimes with stuff like that, I freeze, like
Hmm.
meatloaf but like cooked meatloaf, it's kind of better when you reheat it
Oh,
anyway. So
absolutely.
things like that, like you can make that tin of muffins and then put half of them in a freezer bag after they're baked, and then it's just as good when you take them out and reheat them. And I do that with a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
'Cause I'm only cooking for, I'm only one person and I will make something for the blog that serves four. And I'm
Right.
like, I want to eat this for 4 days. And so I'll take
Yeah.
half of it and freeze it. And I bought the glass containers, like glass storage containers. I don't use
Yeah.
like ones anymore. And like I bought labels so I can just write on there what's in them and stuff like that. So that helps a lot too when you do have a dish that you make that might serve four, but you're
Right.
only one or two, like just take half of it right off the bat and put it in the freezer and label it. And then you got dinner next week. You don't even have to cook.
Yeah. I found too when it comes to freezer cooking like that, like storing stuff in the freezer, when I first got married, like my freezer would just become the abyss. Well, first of all, it was one of those chest freezers, right? So things went in there, sunk to the bottom, never to be seen again. So once we got rid of that and got like a stand-up freezer,
I just got mine last year. I love
yeah.
it.
So things can still get lost, like when you're just shoving stuff in there and not thinking of it. So I started keeping a freezer inventory. When I put stuff in, I write it down. And then when I always meal plan on the weekend. So Saturday, usually Saturdays, but sometimes Sundays, I'll look at my freezer and say, oh, we have XYZ in there. We can have this on Monday, this on Tuesday. So I know what's in there and it doesn't get lost or forgotten about again.
Yeah, I do that a lot.
Yeah. Because I mean, especially when you're stashing a lot of little things in the freezer, they get lost. But
That's why, because I ended up with a drawer full of like containers that I didn't know what was in them. And
yeah.
I was like, ooh, mystery meal Monday. So I bought labels and a Sharpie and I was like, just keep them right next to the
Hmm.
freezer. So I just stick them in there and I put it so that way I know right off the bat, like what am
Yeah.
I putting in my freezer? I have a freezer list too, because a lot of times for when cooking, it's like I never like I don't want to have to dig through there to look and see if I have a pork tenderloin. So I can just look and be like, oh, I have one, or oh, I have a pound of hamburger, but I need 2 pounds or whatever, and I can grab
Yeah.
that at the
Oh, you'd
store.
laugh if you saw my freezer because if you open it up, there are literally plastic bins in there labeled pork, beef, veal, chicken. So I
Oh,
take
I
like
have
those.
a beef shelf. I have a beef and
Yeah.
pork shelf, and I have a chicken and fish shelf. So I didn't get quite as OCD, but a little bit.
Well, go ahead. You can
I
call
know
you
you're
can call
okay.
me that. My
You're
family does. That's okay.
called OCD. But yeah, I think the biggest thing with one or two is looking in when you look at a recipe, if it says it's for four, just cut it in half. Like if you're not
Yeah.
sure, I mean, that's the thing is like just because we make these recipes or you find them out there doesn't mean you have to stick to them to a T. And if you see a recipe that's like a casserole, or if you're like, man, I want this cheeseburger casserole, I haven't had it forever. Well, just make half. Like you can easily cut the recipe in half, grab a calculator if you can't do the math, and put it in a smaller dish. Like I have lots of small casserole dishes, and
Yeah.
I eat off of small plates. Like I don't ever eat off the big plate. I eat off like the salad plates just for like portion sizes, even. Not that it's doing
Mhm.
me much good, but
Listen, you get points just for eating off of a plate because I'd probably eat it right out of the pan if it was me.
I never, and oh, don't ever eat off paper plates. Everybody that uses paper plates, stop, because I watch my 600-pound life, and that is everybody on my 600-pound life uses paper plates. So
That's
that's
the common
cooking for
denominator.
one and two. That's a life tip right there. Is if just stop the paper plates
So eat right out of the pan or put it on
or
a
on a
small
stick.
salad plate.
Yeah, yeah. Just
Yeah.
skip the paper plate. I can't believe grown adults use. I just can't. I'm like, okay.
Yeah. I mean, we do here and there, but I'm
Yeah,
the same way. I
everybody
like
has
to
it
eat
for
off of
like quick situations, but
yeah.
like not every day. Like,
Yeah. I like to eat off of a regular plate. I figure if it's just going in the dishwasher, I deserve to have, a nice cooked meal on a regular plate. But you do
yeah.
you. Everybody can do themselves. It's that's your
And all the hate mail to me if you're a paper plate person. Heather, just
we'll
at the fuzzy.
we'll put her address in the show notes. No, I'm just
Yeah,
kidding.
please. That's fine. I'm used to it.
Just kidding. So, when it comes to small batch cooking, do you have any other strategies or tips? Because I'd love to hear how you split an egg up.
Well, yeah, I mean that's the thing. Sometimes with that you really can't unless you're using it like it's a beaten egg, then you
Right.
could, but even it gets a little gloppy and it's hard. So, but sometimes like you have to think about what you're making as well. Like if you're using an egg for breading, who cares if you throw a little bit of egg away? Same with like panko. I'm obsessed with panko. I use it like as a breading for so many things. I just buy a big container of it because I know it's like every time I use it, you got to use a lot. And so you're going to throw that away, but it's really not that expensive. It's not like you're
Yeah.
throwing away a pricey item there. And so but if you're baking something, like if you're baking a cake,
Right.
obviously you want to be like you got to be more specific on your ingredients. But if it's something like a meatloaf and it calls for 2 eggs and you only have one, or you're splitting a meatloaf in half and you want to make, like you said, the muffin tins, like an egg is kind of like it's fine. And also an alternative for eggs in keeping things together like a binder. You can also use bread that's soaked in milk as an alternative to eggs. My
Oh,
ex was allergic to eggs, and we had Chef Michael Simon did a thing, and I asked him that question. He was like, "Oh, just chop up some bread and put it in milk and then use that." And it's like a non-egg binder. So there's little things like that. Like maybe if I didn't want to use a half an egg, I could
right.
just, use that, kind of Google alternatives. Applesauce is a good alternative for some things like egg in recipe.
Yeah.
So
And oil.
yeah, I've kind of rigged up some stuff sometimes. Lemonade now.
We all do that. I think we all have those like cheat sheets. But it's funny when you said about like just cut recipes in half and do the math. I tell anybody that will listen, I'm like, I use algebra every single day because everybody's like, oh, you never use algebra again in your life. I'm like, I use it every single day when I'm
Oh,
converting recipes and trying to change measurements and things like that. Like I go back to old school algebra. I set up an equation but I'm a
and
math
like
nerd like that. I like that kind of stuff.
recipes I did, let me find it in here. Was I kind of was thinking, so in my book, I had like different categories, and I was thinking, like sometimes I would love some biscuits, but I don't want to make a whole can of biscuits because there's like 8 biscuits, and then I'm like, my fat butt gonna eat all 8 biscuits, and that's not okay. So I took a recipe for I don't want to use, I'm terrible with yeast. I swear. That's like the one thing. It's like my kryptonite. I can't do it.
Me too.
So
I'm afraid of it.
every time I tried to do it, it always turns out
It's
bad. So I
it's
wanted
something you
like,
have to feed, and I don't like to have to feed my food.
no,
It's
I just
weird.
can't do it. So I found a recipe for no yeast dinner biscuits.
Okay.
And then I just cut it and cut it because a biscuit recipe you're making at home is going to make like 20 biscuits.
Yeah.
I just cut. And it's kind of silly because by the end, you're like, okay, I need a half a cup of flour, which is not very much, a half a teaspoon of baking powder, a half a teaspoon of salt, 5 tablespoons of milk, and 1 tablespoon of mayonnaise. You're literally mixing it. You could mix it in a measuring cup. Like it's literally like that much. But it made just the right amount for just like 3 biscuits. Oh, it made 2 biscuits. So it's like if
Perfect.
it's just taking a recipe and like cut. And then I tried it and I was like, hey, this works. And I made it on air one time on TV. And this girl was like, I'm from the South. I don't believe you. And she's like, actually, that's a pretty good biscuit.
Southern approved.
I know, like a girl from the South was like, that's actually kind of good. I was like, okay. But I think that's the thing is just futzing around with stuff or like not worrying about like what a recipe says. It's like if you want to make it like rice, well, and that's the other thing, like rice, you can freeze rice. If you
Yeah.
make a batch of rice and you have extra, because suddenly one rice kernel turns into 20 and it balloons up so much. And quinoa, stuff like that. Like
Yeah.
I'm gonna try to eat healthy. Super fun days there. I'll make a big batch of rice and then I'll just freeze it and then take it out in batches. So that way, because I get bored with stuff. Like, oh,
Yeah, I'm the same way.
I cannot eat the same thing 5 days in a row. Like those people that do meal prepping and they're like, okay, there's 5 lunches. And I was like, I would jump off a bridge. No, I can't do it. So
Yeah, I need variety too.
pieces, parts, and I'll try. Oh, cat number 2 is coming in the picture. Hi, Lucky. My old lady cat. Um, but I'll try to, piece and parse it out and think, okay, the rice I can make ahead of time. Now, the
Right.
roasted vegetables, I don't really want to make those and freeze them because they're going to get real mushy and stuff. So I'll
Yeah.
make the roasted vegetables at the time. And so it's just kind of thinking about the separate ingredients and what you can batch and make ahead and then what you is better off. And like marinated chicken, I'll throw when I I'll buy the big package of chicken breasts
Right.
and put them in little sandwich bags, not even freezer bags. I just put one breast in each chicken in each bag. And then sometimes I'll just squirt some marinade in there with it. Like I just use Italian dressing most of the time.
Yeah.
And I put that in there at the time, then I stick it in the freezer. And then when I take it out, it's already been marinating for
Yeah, and as it thaws, it's going to continue to marinate and you don't
yeah.
have to worry about that time figured into your recipe.
That's been the biggest one for me is just being able to like cook like that with chicken. Like I mean
Mhm.
it's healthy and like you get bored with it. So it's like I got to do something different with it.
Right.
And that's an easy one. And I cook chicken in the air fryer too. Like, let me tell you, if you have an air fryer and you haven't made a chicken breast in it, it is the best way to eat a chicken breast.
Mm.
It stays juicy, but it gets brown on the outside and it doesn't get overcooked. Like, this is my air fryer tip is you can always add more time, but you cannot unburn something.
You
So I
cannot
always
take it
cook
away.
stuff for a little less. And then I check it with my meat thermometer and then I add a little bit more time because I can, but a chicken breast, like a medium sized chicken breast, is like 12 minutes in the air fryer and it's
Yeah.
so delicious and juicy. Because baked, it doesn't get brown and it's a little meh.
Yeah, just
And then in a
flat.
pan, it gets dry so quick. So,
Yeah. Well,
so
I think you said the magic thing there when you were talking, and that's using your meat thermometer. So many times people will tell me, "Oh, how do you get meat to like not be overcooked and not be?" First of all, I'm like, use the recipe as a guide. If it says, to cook it for 15 to 20 minutes, start at the lower end, but even start checking the temperature before that 15 minutes. And use a meat thermometer. I don't care how seasoned of a cook you are, use a meat thermometer because you'll be surprised, I think, when your
yeah.
meat is actually finished cooking.
And meat continues to cook once you
Yes.
take it out because it's hot. So like people get wiggy about chicken and pork, and I work with the Pork Council. So, disclaimer, they do pay me on a regular basis, eat pork, but like it's safe to eat pork with a blush of pink in the middle. You're not
Yeah.
going to get trichinosis. Pigs are fed inside now. It's not a thing anymore. It's
Yeah.
fine to eat pork with a blush of pink. And so cooking pork, I will cook it to 140
Right.
and then take it out and let it rest. Sometimes 135. And
Yep.
take it out, let it rest, and then it can still have that blush of pink inside. Chicken, I take it out at like 150, 155.
Yep.
I take it out and let it sit for 5 minutes and it comes up to a temp, but it's not dead. Like my
Yeah.
grandma, she would kill it twice. Like that stuff was so dry. Like,
Well,
oh, it
I
was
think
so
too, that was
gross.
before everybody owned a meat thermometer, right? When you think about like their generation of cooking, not everybody had a meat thermometer, and you have to use an instant read.
Oh,
Please
yeah.
don't get one of those ones with the little dial that,
No, and the
those little
instant read is
cheapos.
$9 on Amazon.
Yeah.
$9. Like it
Get
works.
yourself an instant read. You stick it in, it tells you. I even went so far as to take the meat temperatures that it should be at, and I taped it to my meat thermometer so I could never forget. Because there's certain ones that I forget all the time, but like chicken, pork, those I know.
Well,
But
and
there
you
are
have different spots. Like that's the weird thing. Chicken breast gets like, it's like thick on
thick.
one side and thin on
Yep.
the other. So you want to make sure that the middle part is done. The other thing with chicken, as a person cooking of one, they got some steroided up chickens. Because when
Yeah.
I go buy like the big pack of chicken breast, those things are huge. I mean,
Huge.
you're pulling out a chicken breast that's a pound.
Yeah.
And that's the hard thing is a recipe, we might say two chicken breasts, but one chicken breast is a pound. Like, I don't need a pound of chicken.
Yeah.
So I take those chicken breasts that are that huge and I'll only put one in a bag, but then I slice them in half,
Yep.
kind of like your chicken. I slice them in half.
Long
I
ways. Like
long ways.
yeah,
Yeah,
like butterflying it, but
yeah,
taking
and
it
I'm
apart.
trying to say like I don't cut it in half, like I cut it in half this way. And
So
then
those
I
of you
make
that don't have the visual, she- she's showing us with her hands. If you're watching on
yeah,
YouTube, you'll see it, but if you're just listening,
yeah, horizontally, like
there we
long
go.
ways. I don't just like cut the thing in the middle. But the thing is like a 1 pound chicken breast is really two chicken breasts.
Yeah.
Like slice that dog in half, and then both ends are going to be more of an even thickness, so they're
Yep.
going to cook more evenly, and you're going to get more portions out of it, and you're not
Yep.
going to waste as much chicken. So
And I find that when I do that, it's not as tough. Sometimes if you leave those gigantic chicken breasts whole, when you cook it and you get it cooked right and you go to cut into it, like they get chewy and stringy. I don't know how else to describe it. Like the texture is off.
and they're
So,
dry. Like it's hard
yeah.
to cook something that's like four different thicknesses to an
Yeah.
even temperature. So just slice it in half. Then you've got an even Steven piece of meat, and then you're cook. It's a lot easier to cook it. But yeah, meat thermometer is number one on the list. Like if you don't
Yes.
have one, get it for Christmas. It's $9.
Seriously, it is a great, it's a must have. It is on my must have list of kitchen tools that every cook needs to have in their kitchen. Yeah.
Well, and the other thing is sometimes like desserts can be difficult. I'm gonna
Yes.
pull out my favorite recipe, and It was a blueberry cheesecake bread pudding. Now,
Ooh.
bread pudding, let me tell you, if you're cooking for one or two, this is a super fancy dessert that looks fancy and it looks like you did a whole bunch of work and it's super, super simple. And I promise you, you have stuff in your kitchen you can make it right now. You could do blueberry, you can do chocolate chip, you can do cinnamon roll, like you can do so many different things. Basically, you take some kind of bread, whether it's regular bread or cinnamon rolls if you have them, old donuts. Like if you
Ooh.
get donuts, like
What's
old.
what's an old donut?
Well, I'm just saying if you get a box of donuts when you live alone, you buy a box of donuts and then they're not fresh the next day, make some bread pudding out of them
Okay.
and just slice them, tear them up, and then you basically make what you'd use to make French toast, like scrambled eggs with milk.
Right.
So basically the French toast batter,
Mm-hmm.
pour that in, and then I just stick some blueberries in there or stick some chocolate chips in or apples or peaches, anything like that.
Whatever
And
you're
then
trying to use up.
whatever you're trying to use up, whatever fruit that's about to go bad or, something like that. And then you just stick it in the oven and bake it or stick it in the air fryer. It bakes in 10 minutes. And then sprinkle some powdered sugar over the top. And you have this like super beautiful, pretty dessert that everybody's like, this is so fancy. And I'm like,
Took me 10 minutes.
I know, and it's so easy. And the thing is you can do that. So, like, if you've got that sweet tooth and you're like, but I'm just cooking for one, like, I'm not going to make a whole cake.
Right.
Or brownies, I don't want a whole pan of brownies, but you're like, oh, I'd love to have a little sweet tooth, some bread, some French toast, and a little bit of fruit, and push that down so it's in the milk and bake it. And you've got yourself a little individual bread pudding in one of those little ramekins. I'll show you a little picture. See?
Ah, there we go. Yeah. So for those of you who are listening, it's a photo right out of her book and it
Yes.
looks incredible. I mean, it does look super duper fancy.
Yeah, and I've got this one I even put cream cheese in to make it a little creamier too. But I've
Mm.
got a recipe for like dough for like chocolate chip and peach bread pudding I'll send you so you can put those in and they're the same. Like they're individual little desserts. And so it's a nice way sometimes because as a single person, like I do still want a sweet thing now and then. And so it's
Yeah.
a way to make an individual dessert that is not going to be like lingering and looking at me for days.
Yeah, because you might crave it today, but we don't want to eat it for, again, eat it for a week when it sits there. Yeah,
Might want
that's
to
a
eat
great
it.
tip. And plus, like you said, this is a great way to use up those leftovers that you have. So if you have, can you use that with English muffins? I always have leftover English muffins.
Yeah, you could use English muffins with it too. I like softer, but like donuts and bread are a little bit softer, so it
Yeah.
might be chewier, the texture of it.
Yeah.
But yeah, you can.
Yeah. Hmm.
You could use your leftover English muffin and put like butter and salt and a little garlic and make croutons out of them. Pop them in the
Ooh,
oven,
that's a
shake
great
them up.
idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do that with tortilla chips or tortillas when I have leftover tortillas from like quesadillas or enchiladas or, whatever. Like if I buy them for tacos, you have to get them in this giant pack of tortillas, but like I probably only need like four.
Yeah.
So I'll take what's left over and brush them with a little butter and then either sprinkle some of my house seasoning on it, my all-purpose seasoning, or if I want to go the sweet route, I'll put some cinnamon and sugar on it and then just bake them and you get the best homemade tortilla chips. And they're so good and crispy.
Yeah. Sounds good. Make me some.
I do have some leftover tortillas in the cabinet. I can totally whip some up.
Well, and I do a lot of things. I mean, I think that's the thing is just trying to get, maybe more individually portion size things
Hmm.
because, yes, it might cost you a little more in like at the beginning, but you're also not wasting the food in the end. So then you feel bad like I wasted a whole this
Right.
or I wasted a whole that. So, and like peppers, those mini sweet peppers, those are fantastic. And they're
Yeah.
like a green and they're just like bell peppers. They're just small. And like the Roma tomato versus a regular tomato. And you can always go down to the cherry tomato. Like you can break it down and a Roma tomato still got a lot of flavor and it adds, because
Oh, I prefer those.
and I buy a big tomato and then like I take two slices for my BLT and then I'm like, what do I do with the rest of the, and guess I'm having a
Yeah.
BLT tomorrow too, so
Yeah. Yeah, it's that's one of the things I found too when cooking for smaller batches is pre-packaging it when you get home or as you start to prepare it, just take whatever you're not using and package it up to freeze it or store it in some way. But like those tortillas, I probably should have just taken out what I needed and put the rest in the freezer. I mean, if
Yeah.
I'm being smart about it, it's just planning ahead. I think as cooking for smaller batches, you just need to plan, I think, a little bit more.
Well, and I think too, like with hamburger, I'll buy a 3 pound package and I'll cut it up, and I almost put it in like half pound,
Hmm.
because I don't need a whole. I just me, I don't need a whole pound. And usually, if
Yeah.
I'm making like a casserole, I don't need a whole pound. And you can actually too, like sometimes you can substitute vegetables and use less meat, and then it's probably a little healthier too. Like
Right. Like
sometimes I'll use
mushrooms
a
or
half a pound of meat instead of a pound, and then I'll just add like peppers and onions and mushrooms, and I can't tell it's
yeah, you're
fine.
making it heartier. Yeah.
Yeah. But those types of things will help when you're trying to just cook for one or two. It's like that way when you're not grabbing in and being like, "Oh, it's a pound. What am I going to do with all this?" Or like maybe you just want a little couple hamburgers, but I
Yeah.
don't or hamburgers. So pre-portioning things like that, like when you get them and getting those things in bulk so you're still getting a good deal.
Yeah.
Got the freezer space for it.
Yeah. My husband does that. He loves making smash burgers on the Blackstone, and it's the same thing. If we get a good deal on ground beef, he'll just make up a bunch of the patties like ahead of like he forms them into meatballs and then smashes them on the Blackstone. So he'll just freeze those meatballs. I use that term in quotes, meatballs, um separately so that we have some next time. And I am a big fan. If I'm going to make certain foods, if I'm going to spend the time to mess up my kitchen and make it once, like I do this with lasagna all the time. If I'm going to make one, I make two because then, or enchiladas or anything like that. If I'm going to mess up my kitchen and get myself all messy making it, I'm going to do two and then freeze it for later. Yeah.
Well, I
But
think soup is one where I might go
mm,
the opposite way. Is like soup does. A cat just stuck its tail in my nose. Soup is one where if there's not pasta in it, it'll freeze okay, or if there's
yeah,
not a cream-based
cream.
soup. But sometimes, like, I'll see these great crock pot soups, and I'll be like, I don't want to mess up a whole crock pot or make a whole crock pot of soup for just me. So I'll backwards the other way and I'll cut the recipe down to like a third and I'll just make it in a pan on the stove. Like
Yeah.
putting a crock pot on low, like I'll just make it in the stove in a half an hour and it's fine. Like,
Yeah.
unless I'm braising, unless it's like shredded pork or shredded beef, which you're not
Right.
in the soup anyway, it's going to be
Yeah.
fine.
Yeah,
So,
but generally most soups, unless they're calling for like a chuck roast or something like that, you can do those in a short time on the stove versus a slow
yeah, I
cooker.
will do roast. Because I love like shredded beef and shredded pork. So I'll do those like the pot roast and then I'll split it up once they're shredded into separate bags and keep them in the freezer. So then when I do want like to put some in soup or to put some have
Yeah.
tacos or whatever, I can just grab a little bag and then I have it ready for me.
Great idea. Great idea.
I have a lot of Dutch oven shredded beef recipes and my best friend Lucky, my cat is invading again. But she makes these shredded beef in the Dutch oven and then she will make sandwiches out of it. And she'll
Mhm.
take a hoagie roll and the shredded beef and then put provolone cheese on top and stick them in the oven. And I get a hankering for those because it's like my favorite dish when I go home to have.
Yeah.
So now I just make the shredded beef and separate it. And then I can just take one out and like I can have a little sandwich. And I'm not
Hmm.
having to do like the whole Dutch oven and like four
Right.
hours of waiting for the pot roast to get ready.
So I did a birria beef last night in the slow cooker and I have some left over and I think that's what I'm going to do with the leftovers because we actually took the birria taco meat. So it's like a shredded chuck roast that's got like certain flavorings to make it that birria taco and I made grilled cheese out of it. So one of our favorite Mexican restaurants does that with their birria and they do a birria grilled cheese and it is to die for. So that's what we did last night, but I do have some leftover shredded beef and I think I'm going to do that. I'm just going to package it up in individual servings and then the next time somebody wants one, I mean, what it takes maybe like an hour to thaw it,
Yeah.
with just shredded beef doesn't take long at all to thaw.
Yeah.
And we
I have a recipe for like a beef and noodles that uses leftover shredded beef that my best friend had shared with me. She was like, "Oh, we take because they'll buy two roasts and do them because they
yeah,
have 4 people and stuff." And so she takes the leftovers and makes it into like with egg noodles and
yeah.
V8 tomatoes and makes like a beef and noodles with the
Oh,
leftover shredded beef. So that's things too. If you're cooking for one or two and you're like, I love shredded beef or I love shredded pork. Well, make one on a Sunday when you're
Yeah.
watching the Minnesota Vikings win football games. Throwing that in there for the
I
Eagles.
thought I think I heard you say the Penn State Nittany Lions.
Ah, oh, them's fighting words. I'm a Hawkeye.
Oh no.
And I can handle you talking about the Eagles, but not Penn State. But yeah, like if I'm sitting here watching, and I know I'm gonna be home watching the game anyway, like I'll stick a or pot
Yeah.
roast, beef chuck roast, or I'll stick a pork loin in the oven in the Dutch oven and cook it up and then separate it out. And then I know that I've got like, oh, I could make tacos some night with that, or I could make this, put it together and make the beef and noodles or something like that.
Yeah. So one
It's
thing I
great to
do
take
if I'm
advantage of those opportunities when you have them and
yeah,
like thinking a little bit ahead to like not even thinking the recipes out, but you're like, oh, I like shredded pork or oh, I like I know this chicken's on sale this week. Let me get a
yeah,
big of those. Because those individually vacuum sealed chicken breasts, they're always real tiny and they're
yeah,
way more expensive. But it's sort of like, which one do you want to do? Do you have the room in the freezer to
yeah,
package them up, or do you like the convenience of just grabbing one out and sitting it on the counter and thawed?
yeah.
It's
There's a trade-off. One thing I like to do when I cook big on a Sunday, and like let's say I'm doing like a chuck roast or something like that, where I like to keep like with my chuck roast recipe, I'll keep a list of like recipes I can use for the leftovers so I don't forget because my brain is like mush sometimes and I get stuck in a rut and I'll be like, oh, what am I going to do with all these leftovers? When I know I really have a ton of great recipes to use, but I can't always remember them. So I just write them down with the original recipe so that I can remind myself like what I can use those leftovers for.
Yeah, I wanted to do grain bowls because I'm trying to be healthy. And I found like 7 grain bowl recipes and I sort of wrote them out and it's like they all needed roasted vegetables. So I just did a big 2, 3 page
Yeah.
roasted vegetables. And then I had those basically like almost like a salad bar. Like I had them in little
Yeah.
individual containers. So then it was like, oh, I'm gonna do a grain bowl. Okay, well, let me take my quinoa and let me take my squash for this one. And then I need to make up this dressing for this one. So I sort of make my own little salad bar in my fridge.
Yeah. That's great. That's great. So we have shared so many, I think, really good tips for cooking for one or two, or in my case, three. Although sometimes my son eats like two, so it does round it up to four. He's a growing teenage boy. Um, but Heather, if our listeners want to know where to find your recipes or get in touch, what is the best way for them to find you?
Well, my website is thefoodhussy.com. My Instagram is at Food Hussy. So those are 2 really easy ways. And my cookbook is called I Love My Air Fryer Cooking for One, and it's on Amazon. So you can find that there as well. But yeah, just reach out to me, shoot me a DM on Instagram or anything on my email is on my website.
Awesome. And we'll be sure to include the links to all of those places in the show notes or the blog post, wherever you're getting this podcast from today. So you can find the links there. I want to thank you so much for joining me today, Heather, and for sharing all of your insights with our listeners.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here. I love it. I can't wait to come back and share more. I got so many ideas.
Oh, goody. We'll have you back. Thanks so much for tuning in to today's episode of Behind the Recipe. I hope you enjoyed our conversation and picked up a few tips and recipes to try in your kitchen. If you loved this episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with your friends. And I'd love to hear from you. So send me your questions, feedback, or recipe ideas. Just head over to itisakeeper.com/BTR for Behind the Recipe. And remember, the kitchen is the heart of the home, so keep experimenting, keep sharing, and most importantly, keep cooking.